Well, states are toughening their borders with New South Wales amid fears the Northern Beaches coronavirus outbreak could spread throughout Sydney. Victoria and South Australia today joining other states in banning travellers from Greater Sydney and the Central Coast, with people arriving at Melbourne Airport this morning relieved to beat the deadline.
Sydney passengers today arriving in Melbourne, beating the border shutdown by hours. For some, a hasty return home. For others, an emotional family reunion just in time for Christmas.
All my family's here, so we don't need anything else. I've got my parents, my siblings, my cousins. Yep. So that's all we wanted.
The last couple of days have been a bit anxious.
We got stuck in Sydney. We sort of didn't have any options there, so yeah, we're very relieved.
Many had changed to earlier flights, predicting what was to come from the Victorian government.
From 11:59 p.m. tonight, we will declare all of Greater Sydney and the Central Coast a red zone.
Travellers from those areas will not be allowed to enter Victoria. If they slip through, they'll spend a mandatory 14 days in hotel quarantine. The one exception for returning Victorians, if they arrive before midnight on Monday, they'll be allowed to isolate at home.
They will be required to get tested immediately. We will be validating their test results for them and we'll be phoning up with them every day to make sure those test results are in and they're isolating properly.
Roads linking New South Wales and Victoria will be locked down. Victoria Police setting up 13 vehicle checkpoints along the border. Only local residents and those with new permits can cross.
In terms of how long will these borders be closed, they'll be closed for as long as the public health advice tells me they should be. They will not be open on midnight Wednesday night. I just want to be very clear on that.
Passengers arriving from Sydney were urged to get tested at the terminal before leaving the airport. Virgin Australia is now offering credits for those with bookings who no longer want to fly interstate, while Qantas says it will refund passengers for any cancelled flights.
South Australia will set up checkpoints from midnight tonight at road border crossings and the Adelaide Airport. Arrivals from Greater Sydney will have to undergo 14 days quarantine, while those from the Northern Beaches will be turned away.
We know this is going to significantly affect Christmas travel plans, so we don't take these decisions lightly.
Tasmania also mandating 2 weeks quarantine for travellers from Greater Sydney from tonight, but those who've been to the Northern Beaches aren't allowed in. Queensland banning visitors from Greater Sydney from 1 a.m. tomorrow, while Queenslanders who visited the area have an additional 24 hours to get home.
And I'm not going to allow anything to destroy our tremendous effort that every single Queenslander has worked hard to achieve.
WA taking the strictest approach, reimposing a hard border with all travellers from New South Wales.
And SBS reporter Abby Dinham joins us now from Melbourne Airport. Good evening, Abby. We've also heard from the ACT and Northern Territory governments late this afternoon. So what restrictions have they put in place for Sydney residents?
Good evening, Janice. Yeah, things are moving quite quickly now. We've only just heard from the Northern Territory that it's shutting its borders to anyone from Greater Sydney, and it's effective immediately, meaning anybody who's on their way there at the moment, who lands in the Northern Territory tonight, have the option of either turning around and going back to Sydney or going into hotel quarantine for 2 weeks, while the ACT are asking people from the Northern Beaches who are entering the territory there, if they've visited that region, they have to isolate for 2 weeks, and people will be required to sign a declaration upon entering.
And Abby, the Victorian government is planning to implement restrictions for travellers from midnight tonight. So how is it planning to enforce these new rules?
We had quite some strong words from Daniel Andrews today. He said he didn't want to leave anybody with any doubt that travellers from Greater Sydney are not welcome in Victoria, and his advice to Victorians is do not travel to Sydney. Like other premiers, he said he didn't want to risk the progress that we've made in Victoria, and that the state's response is proportionate to the risk in New South Wales at the moment. So while travellers from Greater Sydney and the Central Coast are effectively banned, if they do manage to get into the state, then it will be 2 weeks weeks in hotel quarantine for them, while Victorians have an additional 24 hours in order to get to Victoria. If they can get in by midnight on Monday night, then they'll be able to isolate at home for 2 weeks. After that, they'll have to go into hotel quarantine as well. And as we speak, Janice, there's 700 Victoria Police officers setting up checkpoints on the New South Wales-Victorian border, but they warn it won't just be the checkpoints, there'll also be roving patrols to ensure that nobody is trying to sneak in using the back roads.
It'll be watertight. Thanks so much, Abby Dinham, updating us on some of the newly imposed travel restrictions.